r/askReddit. What feels like a cult, and is in fact a cult? All of these nutrition places with their loaded teas are just a front for Herbalife. Most MLMs have the cult vibe. The Lula Rich documentary talks about the major cult vibes they were using to work their retailers into a frenzy and not realize they were being conned. The Lula Rich documentary is fantastic. Turned on my PS5 to play some Diablo 2R the other night. Wife calls me from my office to show me this doc she's about to start. Okay, I'll watch for a minute. 4 hours later, PS5 ended up in sleep mode because I binged the whole miniseries with her. And that is how happy marriages are formed. I was in an MLM. Went to an event in Texas. It was just weird. I never felt so homesick in my life. My sister worked for Mary Kay and she tried so hard to recruit my wife. It's definitely cultish. Those shit stains conned my sick mom out of at least $40K over the year or so she was involved with them. The bitch that got her into it then refused to help her get out, then had the audacity to get shitty with mom when mom declined to help her pay for her 5th wedding. The best part isn't the shampoo you sell, it's the women you meet doing it. Chick who lives near me who would always try to sell hair products on her story and they would always say, "This is not a pyramid scheme." Looking into their Instagram page, it looked like they were super into recruiting women and making a cult of unity, with a minimum you have to spend each month to keep your membership, and to stay friends with them. The people whose downline you're in who are surviving on their cut from the minimum amount of shampoo you're buying. Noticed on the couple of MLM friends I have on FB. Everything they post about MLM is always liker and comments on by a small army of other MLMers. Whatever it's complete BS like, this product gives energy directly into your cells, or some other fabricated lie, they all support it and write other lies themselves to back it up. Completely delusional. It's a detox. Forget about your liver and kidneys. Our powdered tea with shitloads of caffeine will cleanse your cells and DNA. Cleanse your DNA. Thanks. Now I can clean up half of my morning espresso, spilled over the kitchen counter. Our teas won't alter your DNA with tiny microchips and 5G at a cleansing tea. The founders are Mormons, so they brought a lot of those manipulative tactics to the business. It was a cult within a cult. It's cults all the way down. Why aren't MLMs illegal or banned if they're so bad? There are laws against pyramid schemes that are intended to ban MLM-like business models, but these companies have figured out how to operate within the letter of the law, or at least how to convince courts that they're doing so. I believe the most important things they do to stay compliant are: 1. Ensure that most if not all of the money they collect from salespeople is in exchange for tangible products and services. 2. Ensure that all their training and marketing materials sufficiently emphasize selling actual products to actual customers. And 3. Ensure that it's at least theoretically possible to make a decent profit by selling products to customers. That's how they maintain the fiction that the goal of the business is to sell products and that the recruitment incentives, bonuses, commissions are intended as supplemental income, even though virtually every profitable salesperson gets most of their income from the salespeople below them rather than from their own customers. The owners are also extraordinarily wealthy, which allows them to afford excellent lawyers and also to lobby quite effectively against stricter regulation. One example of how successful MLMs have become at being cult-like is that federal law requires they produce income distribution charts which outright show how many salespeople are in each income bracket, but none of the downliners seem to give a shit. They all think that they'll hit the jackpot and end up on the next level of the pyramid. In North Jersey, 90% of them are only Spanish-speaking, converted bodegas or ground floor homes with the same exact decor, green and orange tulle curtains. I don't know why, but I see a badly painted orange or lime green shop and just plastic chairs. I know what's going on inside. Definitely targeting poor families too. Herbalife had specific decoration requirements, black paint with a green door or something, if you wanted to open a shop. It might be the same thing. Herbalife only has requirements on making sure your shop name does not include their name and that you aren't promoting their business name on the outer, visible portions of the establishments. Hence the green and orange curtains. It lets others passing by know that it's an Herbalife shop. Herbalife just doesn't want the lawsuit if you happen to poison someone in your shop with their poison. City name, nutrition. Exactly. We have one in my small Texas town. Half the town seemed genuinely excited and said, "We're getting a smoothie shop." The rest of very skeptically said, "You do know it's Herbalife, right?" Westboro Baptist Church. A few years ago, they decided to come all the way to Montana and protest the Catholic Church, IIRC, because we're too friendly towards gay people. Thing is, they were protesting outside a cathedral with several tons of church bells. The bells, electronically controlled, were set to crackhead in the tower pulling all the ropes. You couldn't hear a word of what the Westboro nuts were chanting over the constant chiming. Then it started randomly snowing on them, so they packed up and went home. Snow fell on them and they left. What a picturesque sight, like peace was being restored by God himself. LMAO, I was gonna say, that sounds like a pretty clear message from God. Yeah, they protested outside of a fallen soldier's funeral with signs that said absolutely horrendous things. The father of the fallen soldier sued for defamation and emotional distress and got $5 million from the church. Crazy stuff. Can confirm. Lost 3 of my soldiers during my time in the army, 2 in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, and had a commander murdered stateside. Most heartbreaking and gut-wrenching thing to experience is trying to pay your respects to a family that has had their loved one taken and see WBC and their protests in the background. One funeral in NC they protested dissipated quickly when the Patriot Guard literally formed a wall to block WBC from seeing any of the procession or the gravesite. I support people in their right to protest. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't, but there has to be a clear line between exercising one's right and infringing upon another. Just my opinion, but WBC strikes a deep chord with me. Wow, thank you for sharing your first-hand experience. I just read the court docs for this case really recently and it made me extremely sad for the father. They exploited his grief through hate speech. Really struck a chord in me. Thank you for being so kind. That fine line is often razor thin, at times. That's quite the throwback. A group of 40 sad people dominating media cycles for a few years as IRL trolls. Brought down by Louis Theroux humanizing them and exposing their funding tactics to the world. If anything, the whole thing is a fascinating story about the collapse of US journalism. They're sadly still around. They're still around, but they don't get anything like the media attention they used to. They're kind of seen for the low-rent crackpots they are now. Particularly now that the old man croaked, and apparently recanted a lot of his beliefs on his deathbed. I followed up on that claim. It's false according to Snopes. He didn't recant. That link just debunks the myth that he came out on his deathbed. He was excommunicated by the church before he died, however, so that would seem to indicate he'd had some sort of change of heart. Regular Baptists as well. Had a Baptist colleague super into K-pop, it was all she would ever talk about. She would tell you which band she liked best, what the lyrics meant to her, buy tons of merch, etc., until one day she came to work saying K-pop was evil and God hates it. She did a complete 180 because her parents convinced her that K-pop was made by the devil to tempt her away from God, so they made her burn all of it and she somehow convinced herself it's true. I wanted to shake her awake. It was so damn sad to watch someone be manipulated like that. I wasn't close to her, so I couldn't exactly talk to her about it. That makes me so sad. Even if K-pop isn't my thing, that just makes me upset. Poor girl. This story could be of any religion. Cults are only religions that didn't take off enough yet. All religions are cults. Can't wait until the world gets rid of this plague. I know I won't get to see it, but I hope all your children will. That right there, folks, is a Reddit moment. Within the cancer community, there's a political group who have all read, probably, Chris Beat Cancer, and it's a bullshit book telling you can cure cancer by changing your diet. Sugar is the main villain. You can fight me all you want, but sugar does not cause cancer. Listen to your oncology-approved dietitian and get the frick off Facebook. Just this past weekend I had lunch with my friend's dad, who is also terminal, and his wife has banned him from sugar because of this bullshit. The dude is dying and he's not even allowed to enjoy himself in moderation. Because she heard about it on Facebook. Edit. Chemo brain often forgets the huge difference between nutritionist and dietitian. Sorry, my bad. And finally, I'm done arguing. Thanks everybody. Please listen to the cancer patient in your life and what they want. Do they want to change their diet? Absolutely go for it, but make sure they're getting the right nutrition from a qualified professional. Do what they want. You actually have no idea. We really need to shift our current state of cancer care to a more palliative, not hospice, big distinction, model. A cancer patient that is as relatively happy as can be has the potential to increase their outcome. And finally, donate blood and sign up for bethematch.org. We need you. When I had cancer, people gave me a lot of unsolicited advice. I was told to do a number of bullshit diets and to not use Western medicine. I had no tact at that time. I was so exhausted and sick. I would just remind people that I was a single mother who did not have frick around and find out money for alternative healthcare, and it would be cruel to deny my children their mother because some idiot told her to change her diet and she died. I asked a few people if they were volunteering to pay for my funeral. Edit. You guys gave me treasure. Thank you. I have found that, are you going to pay for this? Is one of the best ways to get busybodies and pests to go the F away. We had this fight with my grandma. I, out of state, happened to be visiting her in hospice when they did a team conference, so I sat in on it on my mom's medical power of attorney and also out of state behalf. My aunt was the one doing a lot of the day-to-day since she lived in town. She was having them deny my dying 94-year-old grandma cookies because she wanted her to be gluten-free, no kind of gluten intolerance, allergy, celiac, and no reason to suspect it. So my mom had to tell them to give her all the cookies she wanted. Jesus. When my grandmother was dying, she just ate Cheez-Its until it was time. That's how I want to go. While fighting cancer as a teen, I had hundreds of people trying force fruits and essential oils on me to cure me. It was irritating as hell. Did you get the backwards judgment, too? When I had cancer, people would backhandedly tell me that meditation, eating all organic, etc. was what kept you from getting cancer. And if I had it then, it was probably from all those toxins, right? People want so badly to think they can have absolute control over health and mortality. Fools. No lol. I had a heart transplant as a kid, and when you get a transplant, your immune system tries to kill the new organ because it doesn't recognize it as an organ. So I was immunosuppressed, but I was on too high of dose, so my immune system was weak enough to develop cancer. People tried to tell my parents to sue the doctor, but we refused because my heart failure was way worse and I was saved from a dying heart and collapsed lungs. I was only on the transplant list for 5 days. Thankfully, the cancer was never as dangerous and easily treatable. Now I'm a huge germaphobe. I watch what I eat, a vegetarian, and I refuse to go near sick people no matter who gets offended. The same people call me dramatic now. Edit. Doing all the thing you listed won't stop cancer. Your immune system is what stops the cancer cells. What the hell is meditation going to do to cancer? Make peace with it so it goes away. The Prosperity Gospel. All hail Joel Osteen. Imagine Martin Short channeling Tim Allen. You can't unsee it after that. I can't unsee, and this is the second thing I've seen on Reddit. Looks like a literal demon. This has got to be the greatest description of Joel Osteen I've ever heard. Frick Prosperity Gospel me and my homies representative liberation theology. What's that, like Rastafarianism? Liberation theology began with Latin American Catholic thought developing in such a way that focuses on the Bible as a text that advocates for the liberation of the oppressed, named for the book A Theology of Liberation by Gustavo. Liberation theology is just the prosperity gospel, but instead of Jesus giving you a Mercedes, he gives you a minimum wage job. Jesus isn't a way to get things, he is the thing you get. Jesus isn't a way to get things, he is the thing you get. Disappointed.gif. No. It's taking Matthew chapter 25 verse 40 seriously. Most mainstream evangelicals also consider it a cult, pretty much, they just don't get on TV to shout about it. Yup, my old man was a Baptist minister, he's a good man. Hates M. And so do I. My dad was a Baptist preacher as well. In one of the last conversations I had with him before he passed away last May, he told me that the church in America is rotted from the inside out. He never lost his faith in Christ, but he sure did lose his faith in his fellow clergy. Not a lot of feel-good right or paycheck vibes given out with the OL back pew fire and brimstone talk. We ain't here to tell you God's giving you a Mercedes, Ethel. Of course, he could have hated them because he was the other extreme. God wants us all to live a life of austerity and misery and all that. But I'm just going to assume he had his head screwed on right. On the topic, was just talking to a young Baptist pastor from the US on a teaching trip to my country. He said COVID vaccines were required by his missions organization and expressed grave concerns about the direction of American evangelicalism, the cult of Trump, etc. It's just you won't hear about the normal ones. Primerica. Worst cult vibes ever. I almost got suckered into that. After going to an interview, I realized what it was and decided to back out. A year later, I saw they had charged my card $30. It took me way too long and more arguing than should have been necessary to get a refund. Almost got suckered into that. After going to an interview, I realized what it was and decided to back out. My exact experience. I had worked for Kirby 2 to 3 years before this. A friend invited me to a meeting, and it was Kirby all over again. The overexcited enthusiasm and friendliness that has horror movie vibes, which is accurate because the real horror is you getting drained financially while they string along promising riches. Man, when I was about 18, I got sucked into both Primerica and Kirby. I was young and dumb and wasn't aware of MLM and pyramid schemes and shit. What can I say? I was a sucker. Now that I'm older and wiser, now have a solid career as an entrepreneur getting my Herbalife business going. I had an interview with Primerica. The guy interviewing me was such an asshole. Few Google searches made me realize how fricked up that organization is. I also had a Primerica job interview and spent the whole time trying to get him to tell me what the company does and realized it was a scam in about 5 minutes. Spent the rest of the time seeing how many circles I could get him to talk and dodging the question. Couple years ago, I got a new job and was eager to learn as much as I could. A more senior member asks if I had time for a meeting during work hours, so I agreed thinking it was about performance, extra responsibility, etc. It wasn't. He was leaving and asked if I wanted to come with. He spent the whole time talking about how great it is and how it's totally not MLM. I once had a friend try to get me to go to a meet with them. They posed it as, "You're helping me out because I have to practice. This meeting will be with my mentor." One look into Primerica and I sent my friend a long email with just a few reasons why it was a scam. I said, "If you still want me to go, I'd be happy to talk to your mentor about all of this and explain why it's scammy." I was afraid it would put a damper on the friendship, but they were actually really nice about it and replied with a "Thanks so much, I didn't know this information before." We're still really good friends now. Just went through this with my brother. Did some research beforehand and realized it's basically an MLM. His mentor was going on and on about how she is a regional VP and how she just knows my brother will make it there too. I asked her how many people she has recruited in her 7 years there, and she said something like, "Oh, so many I've lost count." So I asked how many had made it to regional VP. She admitted none had and got really defensive after that. Working at In-N-Out was a bizarre experience I would liken unto a cult. They damn near worship the owner Lindsay too. When I went to the company picnics, she would perform on stage dancing. Once she did this weird sexy aerial dance in a floating cube. And the associates go crazy for her. Like, nuts. One of my coworkers and I were sitting there so uncomfortable while everyone screamed and grabbed at her like she was the damn messiah. Literally snot crying over not getting a t-shirt signed by her. Like, that is the billionaire heiress who employs you, not fricking Beyonce. Then of course all of the In-N-Out culture, like the specific language you have to use, not just with customers, with each other too, the extreme Christian standards. It was nuts, and after working elsewhere, it was my first restaurant job when I was in HS until last year, I realized exactly how culty the whole company is. That would be creepy even if it was Beyonce. Beyonce fans are a cult all of their own TBH. They used to put Bible verse chapters and numbers on the inside of the bottom of their cups. I don't know if they still do. To their credit, everything I've heard about them says they treat their employees way better than what the industry standard in fast food is, like not emotionally and as people but financially, and what they offer benefits wise, yet somehow they still seem to maintain fair prices for their food. You can always tell the employees are at the end of a shift because they act cheery as hell but their body language says they're ready to go chill out, lol. Still do. Always thought it was strange when I first saw it as a teenager. As time goes on, I'm seeing why the encouragement of cheery attitudes became a thing, though. It definitely has an effect on everyone around you. Think I'm overall indifferent to it because they actually pay their employees a reasonable wage and offer them benefits. Did not know about the crazy dancing billionaire heiress and her zealot employees, though. That's definitely weird. The troubled teen industry. For anyone who isn't sure what this is, I recommend the Joe vs. Elon School graphic novel at www.elon School. I was sent to a wilderness program for being a troubled teen, and I can say with 100% confidence that my issues only worsened because of it. I am still working with a therapist to deal with the trauma that program caused me. The feeling of being stripped out of your bed at 2 a.m. and being put on a plane, not being told where I was going, with 2 large security guards keeping me hostage is something I will never forget. And that isn't even the tip of the iceberg compared to the things they did to me and other kids once I got there. Shit needs to be illegal, it goes against fundamental rights. How the hell is that even legal to begin with? Holy crap. Parents have a lot of leeway when dealing with their children. Even horrible parents can pretty easily avoid CPS. Know a teacher who was working for months to try and get a kid away from an abusive household. Like, locked in the attic without bathroom privileges abuse. Like the kid would come to school as a 6-year-old with a diaper, and the parents would talk about how he wasn't potty trained. The kid knew how to use a toilet just fine. Anyway, the parent would just leave the county if a teacher started to get evidence, because, and I'll get the exact reason wrong, but something like, you have to have 6 months of observation of borderline abusive behavior to take action or something. CPS is understaffed, underfunded, and frankly, even if they succeed getting them out of a broken or abusive home, often they aren't any better off. A lot of foster homes are abusive and a lot of kids suffer irreparable mental trauma from being ripped from their home and made to live somewhere else. And CPS knows this, so I assume it's tempting to let small things like wilderness training slide, because families that can afford to send their kid on a wilderness scared straight mission probably are at least putting food on the table, and probably aren't actively abusing drugs. And that's kind of the bar if you aren't sexually or physically assaulting people. Edit. I feel I should note, the teacher I know did get said kid into the custody of his grandmother. So, things are going as well as they can be. I still think there is a pending trial. It honestly sucks so much. I knew the CPS wasn't very efficient, but I didn't know it was that bad. And yeah, even when they are successful, foster homes are just as bad, or worse. All this said, kidnapping still seems a bit too much. You'd think bigger organizations would get involved. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. What is that, like those scared straight programs? Worse, a lot will pretend to abduct you and yell at you for hours, keep you awake for days, not really feed you, even physically hurt you on purpose, because many kids who go through this don't get arrested as adults. Let's ignore the ones that do or the mental health effects, so it has to work. Pretend to abduct you? Oh no, my parents paid for me to be abducted in the middle of the night. It was professionally recommended to them by doctors, threatened with handcuffs, and put on a plane out of state without any semblance of an explanation until after the plane had landed. They paid good money to have me kidnapped, and they still maintained it was better to traumatize me than to let me continue as I was, in an abusive relationship and acting out. This is incredible. I had no idea this was even a thing. I'm really sorry. Paris Hilton was put in one of these, I think in Utah. She has a really freaking disturbing documentary about it and its other survivors. I know the Cash Me Outside girl was talking about her experience in one. Dr. Phil has a track record of sending people there. I met a girl who had been sent to one by him and ended up suing him for how awful and abusive it was, not sure of the results of the case. Silicon Valley tech companies are not a cult. However, there is a subculture within Silicon Valley tech companies that is a cult. Here are some things to watch out for. Sleep deprivation. If your team wants you to do overnight on-call, and overnight pages happen more often than once every 7 on-call shifts, your team is a cult. Training versus guilt. If your team assumes that you already know all the details of the tech you work with, and dumps weird guilt on you when you don't know an obscure fact, your team is a cult. Rich lifestyle versus actual returns. If your team encourage you to pick up expensive hobbies, sports cars, piloting, ski trips, but the company doesn't actually pay enough to afford them without skimping on your regular expenses, your team is a cult. Also, if you've planned a vacation in advance, and it's known, don't let people drag you back to work. You are more important than anything else, frick work. If you told them well in advance and had it planned out, don't let anyone stop you from taking it. It's your team's manager's job to make sure that your team's duties can get done, given the team members' schedules. It's not a surprise to anyone that people like to go on vacation in particular months. It's better to have explicit on-duty rotations than to have unstated assumptions that some people are on duty whenever someone feels like hollering at them. If the team is so fragile that one person using their allotted vacation time breaks the workflow, then the manager is at fault. If someone going for a week or 2 and then coming back to the same job hopelessly derails you, The frick you gonna do if that same person quits, possibly because they can't take time off guilt-free? MLMs, but especially Mary Kay. I went to a convention once as the guest of a consultant because she was trying to get me to join. It was very Stepford. Also, she didn't tell me you were expected to dress up, so I showed up in jeans and a hoodie. I watched some documentary or something about this or a similar MLM, and you're not supposed to know you're supposed to dress up because the point is to make you feel crappy and like everyone else is successful. Now that I know this and I ever get the chance to go, I will put on underwear just for the occasion and nothing else. I feel like you show up in a Chanel power suit while everyone is in their coals and act totally disinterested. Become the queen. Start your own MLM. Gaslight. Gatekeep. Girl boss. A girl I know told me she had a present for me for my wedding and that she'd bring face masks and stuff for me and my bridesmaids and we would all just hang out and do facials. She ended up showing up with all her Mary Kay stuff and doing a whole pitch. I was very annoyed. I would have firmly told her to frick off. At this point in my life, I've learned that respect and politeness is a two-way street. Someone taking advantage of a fun and beautiful time in your life to try to sell you garbage obviously doesn't respect you, or themselves for that matter, so why should you respect them or show them politeness? You'd be amazed how much lighter you feel when you start living this way. 100% agreed. I was young then, and afraid of alienating a friend. Now I know that real friends don't pull this shit. I definitely don't let people disrespect me anymore. Same. Mary Kay meeting. They gave 2 tickets for a draw at the end of the evening. Don't remember the prizes, but when it was my turn to receive the tickets, I only got one because I was wearing pants, clean, job pants, instead of a skirt. Also, the girl that was leading the meeting started to give cheap ribbon awards to everyone present for ridiculous reasons. Some got more than one, and one girl got one because she answered an email. Everyone cheerfully clapped. They also talked about how that restaurant manager that refused to allow a box in the women's bathroom with Mary Kay publicity and free samples was stupid to turn them down, that she didn't understand business and lost such a good opportunity. How about respecting people's decisions? That manager said she didn't want to be associated with those produits, that's all. Huh. What a horrible experience. I would honestly put Amway at the top. They largely created and perfected the modern MLM model. Especially when you realize that the DeVos family, yes, the alternative facts, DeVos, is partially behind it. Edit. Sorry. Wrong Trump-appointed blonde asshole, there were so many. Guess he had a type. Betsy DeVos was the Trump-appointed blonde asshole who was head of the Department of Education, who believed public schools were overfunded. I worked for a major oil company and they had to ban selling Amway at work. Too many people were feeling pressured to buy from their colleagues or bosses. I think now that people aren't even allowed to sell Girl Scout cookies in most large workplaces. They can leave the order form in a common room perhaps, but they can't ask people to buy. Many employers will only allow people to bring in sales brochures for nonprofit things like the PTA, Girl Scout cookies, Boy Scout popcorn, which is so overpriced, you might as well just write a check to the local council, etc. Oh my god, my mom is in way over her head in Mary Kay and I want to scream and cry and bash my head into a wall. She listens to speeches from directors and people that made it. Every year she goes to the big convention in Texas, spending a couple $100s she doesn't have. She watches videos on YouTube. So much of her free time is dedicated to Mary Kay. She won't get a job because she doesn't have time, because of Mary Kay, because she believes so hard that if she works hard enough, she'll make it too. We can't go anywhere without her asking every woman on the premises if they've ever heard of Mary Kay, if they want a facial to try out the products, etc., etc. My brother had to go in for a surgery and she asked the nurses if they'd heard about it, wanted to try it. When he was having problems with endometriosis and trying to get what the hell it was figured out, during COVID lockdowns IRC, he went to a specialist doctor. When he informed my mom he was done with his appointment and ready to leave, she was disappointed because she hadn't gotten a chance to talk to the nurses. He's had a lot of issues with his knee, his hip, his endo, and I have about a dozen stories like that. If I had as many health complications as he does, I'd probably have more. She has borrowed money from both of us to cover Mary Kay orders where she didn't have enough product orders to get to an incentive goal, most notably when she borrowed $600 from me one month because she wanted all the pieces of jewelry that were being offered as monthly incentives that year. Because this was like 80% of the goal, Her director sent me her own bracelet she'd gotten for meeting the goal. A nice gesture, but it was ugly, a simple gold bracelet, one of those ones that sorta open to slip over your wrist with ornamentations on the ends. They were chunky bees. She's been doing Mary Kay for over 20 years, and it hasn't occurred to her that a minuscule amount of people succeed because that's how MLMs are designed, and she won't be one of the minuscule few. As much as I dislike her, for reasons that are irrelevant here, I feel bad for her for being so thoroughly brainwashed. Amway is one of the big reasons my ex and I separated. I was bringing home the majority of our income and paying the big bills. We were losing money each month, and yet we weren't spending enough on the business, and we split up shortly after following many financial arguments. I'm just happy we never had kids. Dodged that bullet. Last I checked, she was very much still in deep and impoverished as all hell. A friend invited me to her Mary Kay party. Of course, like all of these things, I didn't know it was a Mary Kay party. She said it was the girls getting together for tea. Well, they were showing the video of the history of Mary Kay. I pointed out that all of the executives were men, and noted that they kept telling me it was a woman-run company, but literally 100% of the executives are men. Or at least were at the time. My friend pulled me aside and asked me to leave. I was so sad. Just kidding. And she and I never talked again. I'm sad about that. No, I'm not. Just kidding. Oh God. My cousin does Mary Kay. First of all, the makeup ages her so badly, and second of all, it's just insane the shot she posts. I don't like the makeup, but the skincare stuff is great for middle-aged women like me. Their eye makeup remover is the only one I've found that doesn't make my eyelids burn. Too many brands seem to be perfumed, and I do like their loose powder. It's hard to find one in my skin tone, Ivory 0.5, pale AF, that doesn't illuminate all the flaws that come with having naturally dry skin. However, the mascara is friggin' awful unless one likes the cakey tarantula eye look. I wish I could just buy the few products I like without a pitch to become a representative. Was nice knowing someone who was a representative just for the discount. I mean, I'm a severe introvert with an established, enjoyable career. I'm unmotivated by commission, and boisterous situations are my personal hell, the absolute worst candidate for sales. Please shut up and just take my money. The entrepreneur lifestyle. Many people are encouraged to put aside pleasures of life in the tiniest hope that if they just grind hard enough, they'll be billionaires. Oh, also, while caring a lot about your money and how you spend it, buy my $500 plan to help you make money faster. I've found out that if anyone advertises they are an entrepreneur, they are more likely to be a scammer, faker than an actual business owner. Like, I know a guy that owns an excavating company. When he meets people and they ask what he doesn't say, "I'm an entrepreneur." He says, "I work in excavation," or says he owns an excavation company. Only people saying they are entrepreneurs are wannabes in my experience. Whenever people say, "I've founded 50 companies," they never say what those companies actually do, or if the companies are still around. I have a friend that has his own business. I guess he makes somewhere between 80 to 100K a year, but dude works like 80 hours a week regularly. Then on top of that, does all the networking things, etc. It's just crazy. NGL. I make over 100K a year and work 40 hours or less a week. Difference is that I'm content being an employee. I don't have to be some business coach or monetize all my hobbies and aspirations. All that for 100K a year. Don't get me wrong. 100K a year is really good money, but not worth working 2 to 3x longer than most people. 100K a year is really good money, depends on where you live, but it's not really good money. It's between fine and nice, closer to nice. Yeah, definitely depends on where you live. I live in Kentucky, so 100K is a damn good salary for one person. I just want to point out that there are valid resources out there for sale to help you learn how to start, manage, and grow a business. However, the plethora of bullshit out there makes it hard for people to find trusted sources. Oh, 100%. You can get genuinely good advice from genuinely good entrepreneurs. The cultish part is like you said though, with the ridiculous amount of bullshit and people who spout this idea of, if you just give up everything else and grind 24/7 you'll be rich. There's this guy named Gary V or something who talks about how hard he had to grind to work to get where he is. He came over as a Dutch immigrant or something, his parents worked hard, he got sent to some nice schools, yada yada. But he's a multi-millionaire now, so he must have really scrapped for it, yeah? I mean, He talks about how when he was in college and all his friends were going out and having parties and fun and stuff, he was nose to the grindstone working 12-hour days or something in Papa's business. His dad owned a multi-million-dollar profiting wine company which was given to this guy, which is, already torpedoing this entire story. Yes, just give me control of a business that's already very successful. I'll be at the office 10 hours a day or whatever doing very important work like, watching YouTube videos while everyone else is doing the difficult work. But something had to happen to make the business blow up from its humble beginnings, yeah? What amazing innovation did Gary Vee bring to the table? Something easily achievable by you, and you, and you, and you, and you, all of you. If you just grind a little harder. Oh, he was there at the dawn of internet sales. Easy fricking peasy, just get in on the ground floor of the internet, folks. Right after Daddy gives you a company worth millions, hop in your time machine and go moderately in at the dawn of perhaps the single largest shift in commerce in human history. Don't have a time machine? That's fine, there's the internet, being born every day, and you can be the one to get in on it if you just grind hard enough. This, really the weirdest thing being a business owner and talking with an entrepreneur. They've never started a business or taken over one or sold one. I had several friends years ago who called themselves entrepreneurs, but none of them would take the leap and just start a damn business. It's really not hard nowadays to start. Anyone I know who is a legitimate entrepreneur never calls themselves that. They'll use the industry that they are in, like I work in construction or whatever. A relative of mine co-owns a solar energy company. He just says he works in solar. Another relative has one of the largest door businesses in my state. He tells people he installs doors. Entrepreneur is a dead giveaway that you're only thinking about starting a business. They're always showing their Rolex, bridling, the brand new BMWs, tailored suits, but in massive debt. That's a really good point. I know plenty of people who fall into the whole cult of personality surrounding the entrepreneur lifestyle, but nobody who actually owns a business calls themselves that. My dad recently opened a business selling cabinets to people remodeling their homes, and he doesn't call himself an entrepreneur. He says he works in home renovation. Your last point is one thing that drives me nuts about life coaches and the like. It's always so fricking expensive. My dad's really into that shit and tries to get me to tag along all the time. Tony Robbins' entry-level event is something like $1,000 a head. They almost always run a special, where you get a second ticket for free, but that's still so much money. If I had $1,000 for the ticket, plus the money for travel, 4 days of hotel, and food the whole time, I wouldn't need a fricking life coach. I wouldn't say it's all a scam, but most of the business is just amping people up and making them feel good about what they could do. And then they go back home and things are still normal and they just slide back into old habits and nothing changes. I know a guy who literally had everything but lost it all due to the entrepreneur lifestyle cult. He had an amazing wife, multiple properties with rental income, great job as an electrician who owned his own business, etc. Got into the Jordan Belfort cult and slowly but surely kept paying massive sums of money to learn how to get to next level. One of the things he learned is that you need to be in sales to get rich. So he kept grinding by buying these ridiculous classes. Eventually lost everything. Sold his houses for classes, sold his business, moved across the country to keep attending classes, eventually lost his wife. Last I heard from him, he is doing door-to-door washing machine sales in a large city. Gotta be in sales. Literally had everything a normal person could reasonably hope for and now has literally nothing. Whatever the Duggars are, creepiest bunch I've ever seen. Quiverfull, absolutely a thing. Technically their church is the IBLP, Quiverfull is like a DLC. Quite a few churches have Quiverfull followers, mostly Baptists a fake. The name is from this Bible verse lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. They refuse to use any birth control, even tracking cycles. The only method that they are allowed to use is breastfeeding, which only works for 6 months or so. Many of them have kids 1 to 2 years apart. Yep, grew up Baptist alongside some Quiverfull kids. I was too young to really realize how weird it was, but all 16 of their kids wore identical long braids and handmade paisley dresses with big lace bib collars. I have to think, Statistically, like 5 of those kids are gay now. I also grew up going to church with some Quiverfull families. I remember one family had at least 13 children last I checked, and the parents had got married when they were 19 and started cranking them out right away. I did the math once and realized she'd spent basically 75% of her adult life pregnant and the other 25% recovering from pregnancy and becoming pregnant again as quickly as possible. I have to wonder what the line is between I want to have a big family and a person who's got some kind of diagnosable problem that manifests as a compulsion to make as many babies as possible. The quote, "I don't trust people who treat their uterus like a clown car," applies. For them, it's just religion, dog. The Quiverfull movement teaches that never-ending children is good. BC the demographics of the US are changing and they need to breed out the enemy. How does one even afford a family of 6+ kids in today's climate? Both the father and mother would have to work, not to mention the kids once they hit 16, unless the father and or mother had a kick-ass job, but still it sounds so unreasonable to have that many kids and have them all be happy and later productive adults later in life. They often have ministries and get churches to sponsor them. The group they belong to is called Quiverfull. Quiverfull is not a group, it's just an ideological term to describe people who believe that you should not limit how many children you have. You can find people who identify with that principle in multiple different fundamentalist groups. The group the Duggars belong to is Institute of Basic Life Principles, founded and led by Bill Gothard, until he was ousted a few years ago after being exposed for having sexually harassed a bunch of teen girls. And yes, I would definitely describe that group as a cult. Ah, thanks for the correction. I must have heard cults like these described as Quiverfull and mistaken them for the name of the group. They're Independent Christian Baptists. Are you sure it's not Independent Fundamentalist Baptists? IFB has a lot of similar beliefs and critics. I was raised IFB. My dad was an IFB pastor. Can confirm there are a lot of similar beliefs. So glad to be out of that. So essentially they are part of a very weird Christian movement called Quiverfull. This is a very specific movement in modern Christian fundamentalism that believes in very conservative values, i.e., women wearing long dresses, no pants, women not working, no dancing, etc. Their most famous beliefs revolve around children and procreation. They are against any form of birth control at all and believe in having as many children as possible, thus where the Quiverfull name comes from, every child an arrow in the quiver. They are obsessed with sex and modesty and have strict rules for courtship, such as never being allowed to kiss, hold hands, hug before marriage. Because they are relatively cut off from the rest of society, they have a hard time leaving these beliefs and tend to remain to themselves. Most people in this movement homeschool, and kids tend to be taught not to trust outsiders. I'm not trying to sound like an asshole here, but make no mistake, this is a cult and a scary one at that. It's not a wonder how Josh Duggar got away with sexually abusing his sisters for so long when the culture seems to be the perfect breeding ground for hiding abuse. Isn't one of the older sons on trial right now for molesting one of the younger girls? And then the parents supported him, I believe. What a mess. I saw some of the older sisters sort of excommunicated themselves from the family though, even wrote a book about it. I think she got engaged and realized how detached from reality that circus is. The eldest son, Josh Duggar, is currently on federal criminal charges for having purchased child pornography videos, some of which were described by the prosecutor as the most disturbing videos that he had seen in his whole career. He could be looking at 20 years in federal prison. His trial is coming up soon. Prior to this, a woman who worked in a strip club had also alleged that he has violently raped her, and while she later dropped the charges, she maintains she only did so due to the finances and trauma of bringing that type of case. He was also found to have an Ashley Madison account and to have cheated on his wife, and had also molested 5 underage girls, 4 of whom were his sisters, when he was 15 and they were as young as 5 years old, and this is recorded in police documents. Yes, following the Duggar shit show became something I got invested in during the COVID lockdowns. Their smiley, cheerful demeanor is so chilling, knowing all that goes on behind the surface to force that fake cheeriness. Chief's mess in the US Navy, which comes complete with initiation, something no other branch, enlisted or officer, has, and that this somehow forms an eternal bond of blood by family, that includes eating food out of trash cans and sabotaging uniforms for that greater lesson. Then, private meetings that have gray areas, secrets of what happens in those meetings. Specifically anything related to punishments or review boards. The fact that it takes two chiefs talking behind closed doors to get anything accomplished is also proof. People notice, though it's implied that it's not noticed. Brew. Yes. I will always remember when I was deployed to Asia. I was the lone Navy member working with a Marine captain, staff sergeant, sergeant and corporal. The staff sergeant told a story in which he was deployed before with his squad in a Navy unit and the chiefs came to them and asked them where can they set up their mess. He looked at them like they had another head and asked why is that so important. They don't even have bathrooms yet. He stated he didn't like how elitist they acted within each other. When I deployed to Djibouti, it was wild to see that the chiefs had two set tables that only them can use but officers including the base CO don't and they would sit anywhere. And the fact that if you don't do their hazing ritual, they won't consider you an equal. You are just an E7, not a chief. And if I didn't allow anyone to haze me when I was pledging for my fraternity at 18, no grown men and women is going to do that to me in my 30s. My dad has stories from his chief's initiation that he refuses to ever tell me. I used to wonder if it was just some bullshit military thing. Now I wonder if he doesn't have some trauma surrounding the event that he's too stubborn to ever try and process properly. Is there really all of that? Is it really that bad? It sounds horrible. It was some bullshit thing. They don't teach anything there, just a hazing process that old salts don't want to let slip from their death grip. It still happens, even though they aren't supposed to be doing it. What sort of hazing? Now I want to find a chief that's gotten out and is willing to tell me. There's gotta be one that hasn't drank the Kool-Aid. I know that part of it involves burning their old dress uniforms, since chiefs and officers have a different uniform from the E-6s and below. They had guys in the steelworker shop make burn barrels for it. And they get to be in charge when one of them fricks up, so they just settle it in the chief's mess. My first ship's fricking SAPR coordinator, some ICCS, was sleeping with a bunch of lower enlisted females and it all somehow came out on deployment. The chiefs decided, with the skipper's approval, to kick the female sailors off the ship as soon as we got back and he got to stay the head of the SAPR program and got in no trouble. Scientology. I love Leah and Mike for all the work they do exposing this shit and helping people. All the brave people who came forward. Can't even imagine how terrifying that must be. They also run the Aftermath Foundation. You can get in contact with them and request their business cards and they'll send you stacks of them to leave places in hopes that Scientologists will see them and seek their help in leaving. If you like them, then you should check out Aaron Smith Levon. He has a YouTube channel, Growing Up in Scientology, and helps run the Aftermath Foundation. He is also running for Clearwater City Council right now, Clearwater being where Scientology's hub, aka the Flag land base is. The podcast is quite good. Leah's sheer frustration comes through very clearly. I do wish they'd go into more specific details about some aspects that they glaze over though. The whole thing about Scientology using a specific language had me curious, but they never mentioned it again. The podcast is called Scientology, Fair Game, for anyone who's curious. Throwaway account. My child's mother is a Scientologist. In deep, posters, books, pamphlets, etc. Frequents church quite a lot. Believes LRH is a great man. I've tried to have convos with her and her husband about it, but they are excruciating. It always leads to having to watch a video about it. I've been to one of the churches. It's literally an infomercial inside a building. Books for sale all over, shocking, and all written by L. Ron even though he's been dead for decades. They'll spend hours in an auditing session while my child sits in the lobby watching YouTube, which they don't monitor. I know way more about Scientology than I ever wanted to know, and I still don't know enough. And I'm very wary about my child growing up with it as an influence. Obviously, I don't know your situation or country, but I dealt with my child's father being heavy-handed with religion, to the point I had to have a family court mediator order him to limit her time in prayer. He was having her pray for 2 hours a night. They told him 1 minute for every year of age, so at 6 minutes was appropriate. Anyway, my long point is if you have hesitations about your child's religion, and I think you should be hesitant because Scientology is so divisive, they could actually alienate your child from you if you're considered suppressive or some bullshit. I just want you to know you have options and rights. Thank you. Yeah, I've looked into it. Was not sure how much I could protect her with the whole freedom of religion thing. But I talked to her about it a little bit and am keeping an eye on the situation. I live in Clearwater, and 1 street away from my home is a bulk of their apartments. Though I've never seen anything super creepy, I can confirm that no one leaves the compound without supervision. Most are usually in a group and never actually leave the property unless by their own charter bus line. I've also seen armed guards with German shepherds that patrol inside the gates at night. To keep people out, or in. Not like they have anything worth stealing. Their employees aren't allowed to have possessions. Guess who owns the Cult Awareness Network, where Scientology is notably not mentioned? The Cult Awareness Network used to be an independent body that warned people about coercive groups including Scientology. So Scientology sued them for damages and won. Couldn't pay, so Scientology took them over. My grandparents are Scientologists and were even at L. Ron Hubbard funeral. So I was in an institution with a guy who was a former Scientologist. His whole family was still in the church. They basically had their green cards paid for when they came from Mexico, and in return they were supposed to work for the church. They made them all sign 1 million-year contracts for some reason. When my friend and his wife left, they were harassed, stalked, veiled threats, etc. So eventually this guy gets sick of it and beats one of the dudes following him up. Guy was filming him, his wife and his baby constantly. All kinds of crazy stuff. We were housed in the same cell for a time. We're still in contact today. They moved from the LA area due to harassment and worrying for their baby's safety. He's doing well now, and he's actually coming out with his family to visit me and my family in a few weeks. Haven't seen him in years and years. It's actually a 1 billion-year contract. You're supposed to return to and continue working for the church each time you're reincarnated. Out of curiosity, what makes Scientology more of a cult than any other organized religion? One of the key differences is that a cult, through its scriptures or the efforts of its clergy, make an effort to alienate their followers from people who are not in the cult and/or punishing people who leave. In addition to Scientology, of course, this does also include very conservative branches of many established world religions, but just because the Hasidim or Mormons are Jewish and Christian, respectively, that doesn't mean that Judaism or Christianity is a cult, just that it has cults within it. I would watch one of the many documentaries on it for your answer. Mainly the compounds where people are imprisoned, abused, the active brainwashing, the way they surveil, harass critics and do things like poison their dogs, Google it. The way they suck as much money as they can out of their followers, not a tithe, much more than that, their infiltration of government agencies in order to silence criticism and stop law enforcement, the way they cut off any critics from family inside the church, etc. It's a sliding scale, and they're all the fricking way on one end. They actually have people assigned to read, monitor all criticism of them on the internet. Say hi. Jehovah's Witnesses. My mother and stepfather are witnesses. I was not raised as one. She converted about 20 years ago. I was already an adult. It has completely destroyed our relationship. Every life event, every tragedy, everything is used to shove it down your throat. I'm all for freedom of religion. The problem with them is that even if you accept their choice of belief, they are unwilling to accept yours if it is not JW. After years of tolerating them pushing their shit on my children and myself, telling my kids, your mom doesn't know what she's talking about, and ensuring every life event became a massive fight, I finally had to cut them off. They refused to attend my child's funeral because I held the service in a church. My mother and I no longer speak. It breaks my heart. Edit. Wow. Thank you all for the kind words and awards. Your sympathies and support are much appreciated. That's just so horrible. Jehovah's Witnesses are ruthless and covert cult. Everyone knows they are a cult, but many don't understand the extent of how bad it gets. My JW family goes pretty far, but it's my understanding that when a death in the family occurs, it is okay to set aside for that time. But none of my non-JW family died yet, and they wouldn't be in a church if they did, so that's probably why. I'm really sorry for your loss. I dread the day I learn my cousin kills himself. His dad died a year ago. He was a terrible person, alcoholic, untreated mental illness, but I think my cousin never had much else than his parents. He's mentally ill too, but likely takes his meds. We were very close until 6 or 7 years ago. His older brother I'm very close with, but we're both shunned now. He's been shunned for 25 years. I was always in limbo until recently. Nearly all of us are out. It's just the old left. Same cousin's brother is Pimi, physically and mentally out. His wife is a nut job. She messaged his ex-wife from 20 years ago to not talk to him. They don't. Like, what drives a person to do that? She has 4 kids with the man, for God's sake. They used to go around and spy on people to make sure they were acting in the truth. Accuse others so they looked better. Who knows what else? Any JW I know has anxiety, depression, bipolar, addiction, and many tried to kill themselves. Part of that is genetics. Our grandpa was an alcoholic, but a lot of it is trauma and despair. Trauma triggers those underlying issues. The damage is done. If we get together, it comes up without fail. 25 years later and people are still traumatized by it. One of my other cousins had to defend herself in front of elders because her husband was abusive. They didn't believe her. The divorce cost her everything, including custody of her son, who finally got back now that he's old enough. My 40-year-old cousin is talking to his dad and half-brothers for the first time since he was 15. I guess that's progress. I could probably go over there now that my uncle is dead. He was the leader of it all after my grandpa died and everyone started fighting. Last time I was there, I heard him tell my aunt that he didn't want me there. I got up and left before she could come back. I never got to see my cousin. I heard he attempted suicide. I hope he's alright. He was like a brother to me. Frick Jehovah's Witnesses. My mom is JW too. She converted when I was in high school. Same thing. Every conversation goes back to it. She feels like she failed us because she found it too late to raise us in the truth. Sigh of relief. And now she won't stop at anything to get myself or one of my 4 siblings on board. I can't ask her for normal mom advice anymore because the Bible has all the answers. And besides, if everything is going shitty, well, that's foretold in Jehovah's plan and it will all be over soon. Yeah, my uncle, her youngest brother, has been in the ICU with COVID for over a month and she is weirdly calm about it. I try to see if she's okay and she just says calmly that what's happening with Uncle Kevin has been foretold in the prophecy. I'm sorry to hear about your child's sad face. My mom skipped out on her husband's father's, her Phil, funeral last month for the same reason. 1, because it was in a church, and 2, because she didn't think it would be a good place to try and spread the word to his family, and that's all she has in mind for outings nowadays. Stupid question. If JW are a sect of Christianity, why don't they like churches? Because they think that all other Christians are wrong, serving Satan, going to hell, etc. Religion in general is nutty, but JWs really are a step above everyone else in that. One of the best ways of getting rid of JWs, or Mormons, a lot of the time, is just by proselytizing, asking if you can pray for them, even if you're not religious. They just think you're going to lay a curse on them or some bullshit, freak out, and leave. Average Christian on your side of the pond maybe. I, as is almost everyone I personally know, am an Orthodox Christian. We do not care about people's religion. We just chill considering every other denomination heretical and all other religions heathen. We do not try to proselytize anyone, nor do we care about how the frick they go on with their daily lives. Christianity is huge, and the actual denominations have varying degrees of Jesus nuts in them. It's not always black and white like in the States, where if you are hardcore you must be either this or that. No. There are ultra right-wing, baby pumping, every day. Yes, we have church even in weekdays over here that people can attend. Also special ones for saints' days and other celebrations and memorials, churchgoers in the Orthodox and Catholic churches too, but they are a minority. Christianity is not the fricking quasi-atheist Protestant bullshit and Catholicism light practiced in the States. Came here for this comment. They send mail to my house addressed with my government name, not just our neighbor 123 any street, asking me to visit their church. I send all the mailers I get for pest control and landscaping back to them. I was raised as one. They look up addresses online, and using sites like White Pages they can get the names of every person that lives at an address. They won't stop writing to you. I recommend you respond. There might be a phone number in the letter, there might not. If so, call it. If not, write a letter back. Say that you were raised as a JW, but found the truth with the help of Satan. You're one of the 144,000 but have rejected your heavenly calling for a life of service to Satan. Then tell them to please stop writing letters or you'll be forced to summon some demons to possess their homes. They'll believe every word of it. They actually believe in this shit. I guarantee you'll be left alone after that. Edit. Some people think I'm being a bit harsh, which is understandable. This comment explains why I'm so harsh towards a religion that seems mostly harmless, if annoying. I didn't go quite this far, but I did tell them my mother was a witch and I would be passing along any further letters from them to her. I never received another shred of paper with their information on it, nor anyone knocking on my door for the next 2 years I lived in that apartment. They stopped leaving door hangers on my neighbors' doors in my building even. I remember being sick, so I called off of work and was napping on the couch. I was awakened by a thunderous knock on my front door. Like frantic pounding in the middle of the day. In my delusional, feverish state, I thought it was the police, so I rushed up and threw the door open thinking I was about to be raided for some reason. Imagine my surprise when I see two 20-something men a little younger than me looking at me with wide eyes. I greeted them, and the entire time they're sputtering, trying desperately not to make eye contact, just being weirdly cagey. I realized they were JWs, so I was annoyed they woke me up while I had a cold, but I couldn't understand why they were acting so odd. About 30 to 45 seconds into the interaction, I realized I was only wearing panties, a shirt that just barely covered my butt, and no bra. Long story short, I traumatized those poor young men with my heathen degenerate ways. Worked the same, never got any communication from them again or any visits. They sinned that night. Lord howdy did they sin that night. Couple of Mormon boys on their best 2 years showed up when my wife had a migraine. I was across the apartment and I hear her open the door, a few minutes of quiet mumbling and then just her yelling, "Oh my God, I'm gay. Really gay," and slamming the door. Usually we're pretty friendly with the mission boys because we both grew up in fundy religion and like to hang around Exmos and teach them about coffee, but she was really not having it that day anyways. They haven't been back. My dad's friend had JW come to their home weekly and knock on the door. They tried putting up no trespassing signs, no soliciting, with church included, etc., but nothing stopped them. They always had an excuse and would still knock even after a month of not answering the door, and it was always only when his wife was home. Finally, he answered the door on a vacation day he had with a cigarette in one hand, a beer in the other, an AC/DC shirt on and blasting Highway to Hell on his surround sound. He answered with a, "What the frick do you want?" and they never came back. I had a very similar experience. When I was 15, I was laid up in bed for 3 weeks with chickenpox. My parents had just been dealing with the contractor for hours on our upcoming home renovations. Plus I was in bed ringing my little bell for everything like I was the Dowager Countess of Downton Abbey. Now our house was near a JW church, so it was no surprise when two elderly JW ladies came to our front door. The doorbell rang and my mom said, "No one answer it, they will go away." For reference, there are side windows framing our front door you can see part of the living room through. They could see we were home, so they rang again, and then knocked and rang again. My mom finally answered the door, stepped out on the porch and proceeded to let off the longest stream of profanities I have ever heard that sweet woman utter since I was born. If we don't answer the fricking door, it means we don't fricking want to be bothered with your goddamn bullshit, etc. She had truly been pushed to her limit. In the last 20 years they've never had JWs come to their door again, and curiously all the junk mail from them stopped too. That's pretty much what my dad did. They came 2 days in a row. It was an older woman and with an older kid. He was polite the first time, then the next day they came back and said a bunch of BS about how we must be happy about going to hell. My dad went off on them and cussed them out. He later said he felt bad because there was a kid there. But they didn't come back. Ex-JW here, raised in the religion. It's absolutely batshit. When I would tell stories in front of friends or non-JW acquaintances, they'd look at me like I was crazy. It's not even just the horrific way they handle abuse, it's even the way they manipulate language. It's entirely Orwellian. They'll take a word like worldly, which is generally a positive thing, and manipulate it into meaning something sinister and evil. Worldly is used to mean something that is outside of the organization and manipulated by the very literal Satan and his demons. They use equivocation frequently, such as arguing that the faithful should not watch American Idol because the Bible argues against idolatry. They also use constant terrorism to manipulate and control. They target people that are vulnerable, like single-parent families and immigrants, and offer them help before pressuring them into joining the group. They constantly advertise a bloody and literal Armageddon where fire will rain from the sky. This is even in their children's book of Bible stories. If you do something they consider wrong, you are disfellowshipped, which, unlike excommunication, means that not a single member is allowed to communicate with you. That includes your parents, children, and siblings, even if you live with them. It is only lifted when the elders, church leadership, decide you are really sincere in your effort to seek forgiveness, despite teaching that only Jehovah knows what is in your heart. The whole thing is about control and domination. It's completely nuts. Ex-JW here too. As a child, there was once a very stern talk about the evils of Yu-Gi-Oh! I didn't watch that show, but Elle knew of it and it made me terrified that they might decide to ban Pokemon next, which was my favorite. Eventually my parents came to that conclusion themselves and I tried to defend it as my dad looked through a list of Pokemon and pointed out all the ones that had demonic influences. Same here, XJW, but it was the Smurfs for me. Someone in our congregation told my grandma that they were trying to push devil worship through the little blue demonic creatures. That was the last time we were ever allowed to watch them. Also, anything relating to magic, wizards, etc. is considered demonic and worldly. Yeah, my parents were strongly against anything too magical. Harry Potter came out when I was in 5th or 6th grade and was immensely popular, and of course I was not allowed to read the books or see the movies. Same with Lord of the Rings. I finally caught up on all of those books and movies as an adult and really enjoyed them. My JW cousins as kids were allowed to play the Pokemon games, but were not allowed to use the word evolution. I don't remember what word they used in its place, but something like changing or whatever. I remember often feeling worried that my parents wouldn't like some show or game that I loved and would ban it. My first T-rated video game was Zelda Twilight Princess, and I tried my damn hardest to make sure none of the evil parts or lots of fighting happened while my dad was home. The good news is that I have kids of my own now and I'm delighted to watch Pokemon with them and know that they'll never feel that edge of fear that something they love might get taken away permanently from them. Sorry to get rambling, but I could just go on and on about weird stuff that JW kids are subjected to. Nice. You have made it to the end already. Thank you for watching. If you aren't already subscribed, please do so, as there will be more videos like this in the near future.